Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We often picture history as this series of grand, romanticized stories straight out of a textbook. But the truth? The versions we're taught are heavily filtered. So today, we're going to deconstruct those beautifully packaged narratives to reveal the gritty, complex, and honestly deeply fascinating reality that's hiding just beneath the surface.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We've got four main sections to get through. First up, the myth of feudal Japan. Then, Artemisia, the defiant queen. Third, stargazers, science in stone. And we'll wrap things up with the Louisiana Purchase paradox.
Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the myth of feudal Japan, beauty and brutality.
So we're starting off in the elegant but absolutely unforgiving world of feudal Japan. This was a society meticulously designed for submission, precision, and quiet obedience. I mean, we all expect that poetic imagery, right? Cherry blossoms and highly honorable samurai. But the crushing reality of daily survival was way different. For instance, just maintaining that famous Japanese cleanliness, that literally meant splashing freezing well water on yourself in the dead of winter, usually with zero privacy at a public bathhouse.
The absolute most crucial thing to understand about this social ladder is that you bowed to it. You definitely didn't climb it. You were pretty much assigned a costume and a script the second you were born. The emperor, he was basically just a sacred relic with no real power. The samurai were essentially well-dressed middle management living in absolute terror of their lords, and the peasants were practically prisoners of the state. Then, at the very bottom, you had the eta class. They were basically untouchables, treated like ghosts simply because their jobs dealt with death.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that the whole concept of samurai honor wasn't really about seeking glory on the battlefield. It was actually about living in constant, agonizing fear of making one single wrong move. I mean, spilling tea, speaking out of turn, or losing a duel could literally lead to seppuku. This incredibly gruesome, public, and highly ritualized suicide by disembowelment was basically the only accepted exit plan to restore your clan's dignity if you slipped up. Pretty intense, right?
And what if you were a peasant? Well, throw in a diet of crunchy mystery items, paying all your taxes in rice instead of coin, and having absolutely zero free speech. Expressing an opinion out of line could literally cost you your head. Oh, and on top of all that, nature itself was constantly trying to wipe out your village with typhoons, earthquakes, and fires. Arranged marriages were strictly for alliances, not romance. Honestly, the reality is that most of us wouldn't last a single day in the system.
Moving right along to Section 2, Artemisia, the defiant queen, the ancient anomaly. Let's jump over to the ancient world. We're going to look at how a woman completely defied every single rule of a rigid patriarchal society to command an entire fleet of warships. In a world utterly dominated by men, Artemisia existed almost like a historical glitch. She was Greek by blood, but Persian by loyalty. She stepped up to rule Halicarnassus, but she didn't just rule. She basically traded her Greek heritage for immense political power by supplying 5 of her own incredibly fast warships to the invading Persian king, Xerxes the Great.
So picture this, we're at the chaotic Battle of Salamis. Xerxes completely ignores Artemisia's strategic advice to avoid the narrow straits, and she suddenly finds herself trapped. To escape the pursuing Greek ships, she executes this absolutely brutal split-second survival tactic. She deliberately rams and sinks an allied Persian ship. The Greeks are so confused, they actually think she's on their side now, and they just let her sail away, completely untouched. Now Xerxes is watching all this cold-blooded brilliance unfold on the water from a nearby hilltop, and his reaction is legendary. He says, "My men have become women, and my women have become men." I mean, instead of punishing her for sinking a friendly ship, he actually praises her. This wild move cemented her status as one of the only commanders he could truly trust.
Ultimately, Artemisia's legacy isn't about being some flawless moral hero. Not at all. It's about a fierce realist who ruled with cold strategic brilliance and managed to survive and thrive in an empire built entirely by men. She outlasted the male commanders of her time, was entrusted with guarding Xerxes' own sons, and even earned the grudging respect of the famous Greek historian Herodotus. Her lineage even went on to inspire the original mausoleum, literally one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a real game changer.
All right, Section 3, Stargazers, Science in Stone, the telescope-free cosmos.
For this part of the explainer, we're leaping up to the skies. We really need to debunk this myth that our ancient ancestors were just, primitive stargazers staring blankly up at the night sky. It's honestly astounding how disparate civilizations, oceans apart, and completely without glass lenses or modern telescopes, independently mapped the heavens with mind-blowing mathematical precision. I mean, the Sumerians, they literally gave us the base 60 math we still use in our clocks today. The Babylonians were predicting complex eclipses using the 18-year Saros cycle. Over in Mesoamerica, the Maya were tracking Venus cycles with less than a day of error. And the Chinese mapped out a supernova in 1054 CE so precisely that we still study it today as the Crab Nebula.
And over in Egypt, they were tracking the annual dawn reappearance of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. This event, called the Helical Rising, wasn't just theology or some fun myth for them. It was quite literally a matter of life and death. It formed the exact basis of their 365-day calendar. Missing this specific celestial window meant you couldn't predict the Nile's flooding. And if you couldn't predict the flood, that led directly to agricultural ruin and widespread famine.
This incredible astronomical mastery extended all the way to India, too. Way back in 499 CE, long before Copernicus was even a thought, Indian scholars like Aryabhata were already proposing that the Earth rotates on its axis daily. They were calculating the solar year to a tiny fraction of our modern hyper-advanced measurements centuries ahead of schedule.
So the reality is that they didn't just passively watch the universe. They anchored everything to it: their temples, their politics, their entire daily survival. These folks were mathematical masterminds building incredible cosmic architecture. They laid the very foundations for all modern science. So, the next time you check your watch or glance at a calendar, just remember you've got these ancient architects to thank for it.
And that brings us to Section 4, the Louisiana Purchase Paradox, 828,000 square miles of complications.
Let's bring our journey forward to 1803 America. We're going to explore the gritty reality behind what your high school textbooks probably just called a peaceful real estate deal. Okay, get this. France sold a third of the North American continent to the United States for $15 million. That breaks down to roughly 4 cents an acre. But why so cheap? Well, Napoleon Bonaparte desperately needed war funds because the Haitian Revolution had just completely crushed his Caribbean ambitions. So it wasn't exactly manifest destiny, it was basically a massive geopolitical fire sale.
But the really crucial point here is the massive constitutional paradox of it all. Think about Thomas Jefferson. The man was a notoriously strict constitutionalist who deeply feared federal overreach. Yet, when presented with this deal, he completely bent his own rules. He essentially used implied powers to stretch the law just so he could secure the Mississippi River and double the nation's size overnight.
Now we have to look at the whole picture impartially. Yes, this expansion was undeniably a massive catalyst for American economic growth, but it carried a devastating and profound cost. Over 50 sovereign indigenous nations were completely ignored and displaced. Natural environments were radically transformed and depleted, and it directly sparked massive moral crises by violently accelerating the spread of plantation agriculture and slavery into all these brand new territories. Plus, those forced native removals basically became the tragic blueprint for manifest destiny.
When you look at the timeline, you see how fast things escalated. What started as a diplomatic victory with the purchase signed in Paris in 1803 rapidly devolved. You have Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea mapping the unknown in 1804. But within less than 2 decades, culminating in the 1821 Missouri Compromise dividing the land, this huge acquisition turned into a slow-burning collision of cultures, shifting borders, and really catastrophic civil tensions.
So looking back at everything today, from the rigid, brutal survival systems of feudal Japan to the cold naval tactics of Artemisia, those brilliant data-driven ancient astronomers, and finally, the deep paradox of Thomas Jefferson, we see a pretty clear pattern. History is shaped not by perfect, flawless heroes, but by brutal pragmatism, survival, and highly complex human choices. The truth of our past is always messier, definitely darker, and honestly, infinitely more fascinating than the simplified myths we usually inherit.
I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to ponder today. When we look at this massive expansion, was the true cost actually measured in dollars, or was it measured in cultures and landscapes that can literally never be bought back? It really reminds us that every great triumph carries a hidden, profound cost. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history you've been taught. Catch you next time.